The first thing Soren felt was the cold pavement beneath his hands. His head throbbed as he pushed himself upright, blinking against the dull gray sky. The street around him was unfamiliar. Narrow alleys, aged brick buildings, and an eerie silence that made the city feel hollow. He took a slow, steady breath. Where was he? A faint ringing echoed in his ears, a lingering effect of, what exactly? He couldn't remember. His mind felt like a shattered mirror, fragments of thoughts slipping through his grasp. Before he could dwell on it, movement caught his eye. A group of strangers walked past him, their faces unfamiliar yet filled with an unsettling familiarity. Soren? He stiffened. A woman with auburn hair and dark eyes had stopped a few feet away, staring at him as if she had seen a ghost. "Do I know you?" he asked, hesitantly. Her expression flickered with shock. "Soren, it's me, Lyra." Lyra. The name stirred something deep inside him, but it was like trying to grasp smoke. His heart pounded as he struggled to find any connection to the name, to her. "You look lost," she said softly, her concern evident. "Come with me. I can explain everything." Soren hesitated. Every instinct told him to be cautious, yet something about her felt safe. He nodded slowly and followed. As they walked, the streets seemed to shift subtly around them. Buildings appeared slightly different when he glanced back at them, details changing in ways he couldn't quite pinpoint. "Where am I?" he finally asked. Lyra glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "You're in Halewick." The name meant nothing to him. "You don't remember anything, do you?" she continued. Soren clenched his fists. "No," she sighed. "I was afraid of this." Before he could ask what she meant, a distant voice echoed through the street. Faint, familiar. "Go back before it's too late." Soren stopped in his tracks. "Did you hear that?" Lyra frowned. "Hear what?" The voice came again, but this time it wasn't distant. It was right behind him. Soren spun around. There was no one there. Soren's pulse quickened as he scanned the empty street behind him. The voice had been so close, almost as if someone had whispered directly into his ear. Yet, no one was there. "You're scaring me," Lyra said, her brow furrowed. "What did you hear?" Soren hesitated. Telling her about the voice felt ridiculous, but something in her expression told him she might actually believe him. "Someone told me to go back," he muttered. But there was no one there. Lyra's face paled slightly. She reached for his arm, her grip firm, but not forceful. "We need to get inside." They walked in silence as she led him down a narrow alleyway that opened up to a quiet residential street. The buildings here were older, worn by time. She stopped in front of a small townhouse and unlocked the door. Inside, the space was modest but warm. Wooden floors, a cluttered bookshelf, and the faint scent of coffee lingered in the air. Soren's gaze landed on the fireplace mantel, where framed photos were displayed. His breath caught. There he was, in the pictures, standing beside Lyra, smiling as if they had spent a lifetime together. I don't remember this." He turned to her, his voice unsteady. Lyra exhaled. "I was afraid this would happen." She gestured for him to sit at the worn dining table, then sat across from him. "You disappeared a week ago," she said. "No warning, no goodbye. I searched everywhere, and then, today, you just showed up." Soren gripped the edge of the table. "I don't remember anything before waking up in the street." Lyra bit her lip, then disappeared into the next room. When she returned, she was holding a small envelope. She slid it toward him. "You left this before you vanished," she said. Soren hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single note, written in his own handwriting. "If something happens, don't trust him." The man in the gray suit. His stomach dropped. "Who is he?" he asked, looking up at Lyra. "I was hoping you could tell me," she admitted. "You kept talking about someone following you before you disappeared." Soren racked his brain for any memory, but it was like searching through fog. Then, out of the corner of his eye, movement flickered outside the window. A man stood beneath the street lamp. His face was obscured by the shadows, but one detail stood out: a gray suit. Soren's body tensed as he stared at the man outside. He couldn't see his face, but something about him sent a wave of unease crawling up his spine. "Lyra," he murmured, not taking his eyes off the figure. "He's here." Lyra followed his gaze and inhaled sharply. "That's him." The man in the gray suit didn't move. He simply stood there, as if waiting for something. Soren's heartbeat pounded in his ears. Something about this felt wrong, like an unfinished conversation he couldn't remember having. "I need to go talk to him," he said, standing up. Lyra grabbed his wrist. "Are you insane?" she whispered harshly. "You don't even remember why you were afraid of him." "I need answers," Soren insisted. He pulled away and stepped toward the door, but as soon as he touched the handle, the street lamp flickered, and then the man was gone. Soren yanked the door open and rushed outside, his breath forming white puffs in the cold air. He looked in every direction, scanning the empty street. Nothing. No sign of footsteps, no sound of retreating footsteps, just an eerie silence. Lyra stood in the doorway behind him. "He always disappears like that," she said, "like he's never really there." Soren clenched his fists. "He left no footprints," he murmured. Lyra's face darkened. "You told me before that he isn't just watching you," she said. "He's waiting for something." Soren exhaled and stepped back inside, closing the door. His mind raced with fragmented thoughts, but one stood out, the note he had written to himself. Don't trust him. His fingers brushed against his coat pocket. Something was inside. He pulled it out. A small silver pocket watch. The moment he touched it, a searing pain flashed through his skull. A memory surfaced. Darkness. The sound of ticking. A voice, his own, whispering, "It has to stop." Then, just as quickly as it came, the memory was gone. Soren gasped, gripping the edge of the table to steady himself. Lyra rushed to his side. "What happened?" she asked. He stared at the pocket watch, his breath shallow. "I think this belonged to him." Soren's fingers tightened around the silver pocket watch, its cold surface pressing into his palm. The ticking sound still echoed faintly in his mind, as if something inside the object was whispering to him. Lyra watched him carefully. "What do you mean it belonged to him?" "I don't know," Soren admitted. "But when I touched it, I remembered something. A dark room, the sound of this watch ticking, and I said something, 'It has to stop.'" Lyra hesitated before reaching out. "Let me see it." Soren hesitated, then handed it over. The moment it left his hands, the faint ringing in his ears stopped. Lyra turned the watch over, studying the delicate engravings on the back. There was a single word carved into the metal, Halowick. "The name of the city," Lyra murmured. "But why would his watch have it engraved?" Soren's mind buzzed with possibilities. Maybe he's not just following me, he said. Maybe he's connected to this place, maybe to me. A knock at the door made them both freeze. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Lyra's eyes widened. "No one knocks like that," she whispered. Soren's heart pounded. He moved cautiously toward the door, hesitating before gripping the handle. He could feel Lyra's breath hitch behind him. He opened it. The man in the gray suit stood on the porch, his hands folded neatly in front of him. Now that Soren could see him up close, the unease in his gut twisted into something stronger. The man's features were sharp, precise, too perfect, like a painting given life. His dark eyes locked onto Soren's, and though his face was expressionless, there was something eerily knowing in his gaze. "Soren," the man greeted smoothly, as if they were old acquaintances. Soren's throat went dry. "Who are you?" The man tilted his head slightly. "You don't remember." It wasn't a question. Soren's grip on the doorframe tightened. "Should I?" A small, unreadable smile ghosted across the man's lips. "That depends." Lyra moved beside Soren, her voice firm. "Why are you following him?" The man didn't spare her a glance. His eyes never left Soren's. "I'm not following. I'm waiting." The words sent a shiver down Soren's spine. "For what?" he asked. The man stepped forward just enough for the porch light to cast deeper shadows on his face. "For you to remember why you came back." Soren's pulse quickened. "Came back?" The man in the gray suit nodded. "You think you woke up here by accident, that your memory loss is some cruel trick of fate. But that's not the truth, is it?" His voice lowered. "You chose to forget." The world tilted slightly. The pocket watch in Lyra's hands felt heavier, as if the air itself had thickened around them. Soren's stomach churned. "Why would